So welcome back to the channel, guys. It is me, 8744. So today, guys, I am joined with BLE, and today we'll be discussing about Serie A, man. Why does Serie A get so much disrespect? So BLE, man, as a fellow Serie A fan, give me an introduction of yourself first before we even dive into the topic, and then we'll obviously start with the topic.
Right. I am a supporter of FC Internazionale Milano, or Inter Milan for short. I've been a fan for 3 years since the COVID-19 pandemic. So when Antonio Conte was still the manager, summer 2020, when football returned, that's when I mainly started my interest in football. And there was a TV channel I used to watch, and they would stream Serie A matches every weekend. And I started watching that, and then I started watching more and more and more and more and more. They were only streaming Serie A, so I started watching it every single time they had it on. It was very, very interesting to me. Then I looked into the history of the league. Domestically, it's a very strong league. European title-wise, it's a very strong league as well. Great history, many legends that have played in this league. So, and of all clubs, I decided to support Inter because that's the club that I found the most fascinating. Of course, there were AC Milan and Juventus, who are very historic clubs in Italy as well. Fiorentina, Lazio, Roma, Napoli, Hellas Verona, Sampdoria, Genoa. Who else can you name? Bologna even. But mainly the reason why I chose Inter was because the history really interested me the most, especially the 2009-2010 season when Inter won the treble under Jose Mourinho, winning the Scudetto, the Coppa Italia, and the Champions League in the same season. That was magnificent. And not only that, but domestically, Inter had been dominating in Italy for quite some time, winning 19 Scudetti and 9 Coppa Italias and 7 Supercoppas. It's either 6 or 7. So yeah, and of course many legends like Ronaldo. Who else have you got? Javier Zanetti, the club's legendary captain. You've got Recoba, you've got Cordoba, you've got Adriano, you've got Zlatan, who's played at Inter. You've got many legends, not only just Inter, but let's take into account Maldini at Milan. You've got Baresi, 2 Baresi brothers, by the way. One played for Inter, called Giuseppe Baresi, and the other, Franco Baresi, played for Milan. You've also got Gianluca Vialli, Roberto Baggio, Andrea Pirlo, Gennaro Gattuso. You've got many legends in Italy, many legends that have played in Italy for a very long time during the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s when Serie A was at its peak. But since then, unfortunately, the league has dropped off in terms of quality, in terms of financial revenue. That the league is unfortunately not getting enough money poured into it. And let's take into account clubs like Inter, who unfortunately have to sell their best players every single year in order to make some revenue to compete for Scudetti, for Coppa Italia, and even in not too far in the Champions League, but at least somewhere in the knockout rounds. But that's another thing that has unfortunately affected Italian football for a very long time, since the early 2000s, was that you don't really see Italian teams at the top level of European football anymore, which is quite a very sad thing to see, because in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, you would see Serie A dominating European competitions, winning it. Whichever teams like Parma, Inter, AC Milan, Juventus, Fiorentina, Lazio, and Roma, these clubs have been dominating a lot in Europe. And unfortunately, ever since the mid 2000s and 2010s, that has not been a thing that you see anymore. You mostly see teams from England, from Spain, some from Germany competing at the high level. You don't really see Italian teams at that level anymore, unless last season, where you take into account that Napoli, AC Milan, and Inter Milan all made the quarterfinals of the Champions League, with AC Milan and Inter Milan making the semi-finals. Obviously, the third time both clubs had met in the semi-finals of the Champions League, and we got to see Inter go to the final. Unfortunately, they lost the final to Manchester City, 1-0. And also, if you take into account the Europa League and Conference League that Italian teams had done well in, you see Fiorentina made the final of the Conference League. I would say they outplayed West Ham in the final, but they were just unlucky not to score more, and they lost to a last-minute winner. And also Roma, they didn't play well in the final, but they only lost on penalties. So you could say that Italian teams last season did well in European competitions, and they only lost by small margins. Fiorentina by late goal, Roma on penalties, and Inter just by one goal against a very strong Manchester City, who are probably the best team in the world right now. But you could make a case for Serie A teams last season having an easy draw, especially in the Champions League, where you look at Inter's Champions League path. They made it out of a very tough group with Barcelona, Bayern Munich, and Victoria Pilsen, which was expected to be beaten, but not really Bayern Munich and Barcelona. You look at AC Milan, who was in a group with Chelsea, Dinamo Zagreb, RB Salzburg, and you get Napoli as well, who was with Liverpool, Ajax, and Rangers. And let's take Napoli's route. They had Frankfurt in the round of 16, and they lost to AC Milan just by one goal in the quarterfinals. You get AC Milan, who got Tottenham and Napoli in the knockout rounds, and only lost to Inter in the semifinals. And Inter, who were the finalists, the vice champions of Europe, they, like you said, made it out a very tough group, to be fair, and was able to get Porto, Benfica, and AC Milan before the Manchester City final. So you could say that there was some luck in terms of the draw last season, but either way, even if the draw was different, I still would believe that all Italian teams really played well against the top teams from England and Spain and even Germany. So yeah, it's just a wonderful league with wonderful legends who have played here, great teams who have great success domestically and internationally. Unfortunately, they don't have that success anymore, but hopefully someday in the future that can return and we can see more Italian teams dominating European competitions.
Yeah, I think it's interesting you mentioned that, point, because Serie A for me, like when people talk about the best leagues in the world, nowadays, people always say Serie A is such a joke league that's not really taken seriously. A lot of people like to insult the league, which I think is kind of harsh in my opinion, because the league has had like in terms of winners, I think it's had the most unique winners in the last 4 seasons. We've had a different winner since
Yeah,
Juventus won it. We have Juventus, Inter, the Milan, the Napoli. In the last 4 seasons, I don't think any other league in the top 5 leagues has had different winners in the last 4 seasons.
yeah, yeah. And then only those four clubs, like you mentioned, Juventus, Inter, Milan, and Napoli, and they're the only four clubs that have won the league in the last 20, 25-ish years. So 20-ish actually, because Lazio and Roma won it in the late 90s and first year of the early 2000s. So other than that, there's only been four clubs to win the Scudetto since then: Inter, AC Milan, Juventus, and Napoli. So that is one thing that needs to change. We need to have new winners constantly in Serie A in order for people to get attracted to the league, in order to start watching it. More and more people are watching Serie A these days, but it needs to have more than just four winners. Four winners is good, but you need more than that. So hopefully one of the clubs like Fiorentina, Lazio, and Roma, they eventually get to those heights, but it's very doubtful. And
Yeah,
like you said, a lot of people say a lot of bad stuff about Serie A. They rightfully say that because they do not have enough money, unfortunately, to compete with teams from a few teams from La Liga, with PSG, and also Premier League teams. So they don't have enough money to
yeah,
constantly on a yearly basis be in deep to have deep runs in Champions League, Europa League, Conference League. Maybe Conference League is where you can see some Italian teams competing for that, but the problem is the Champions League, which the teams do not have enough money for that, and they don't have enough squad depth either to play against tough opponents every time. And that's why you could say that all three of Napoli, AC Milan, and Inter Milan had an easy route to the later stages of the Champions League because they had favorable draws, but at the same time they also played really well in them. So the main issue is with the money, and that's why a lot of people talk bad stuff about the league, mostly because of the money and how the league is slow, not really high pace, which it has improved slightly in that manner, but still you can see dirty matches, defensive football, you can still see that a lot in Italy. So the one thing that needs to be changed is the style of football that is being implemented there. So
that is true. A lot of people do call Serie A a very slow league, and also people like to say this league is very defensive. Catenaccio, it's not very attack minded. A lot of teams are defensive.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and they just don't. Of course, they attack and score goals, but they don't do that on a minute basis like they should during the whole match. They do not do that because they don't have enough depth for that. Even in the league and when they play in European competitions, it's still very dirty football that they're using. So they need to change the style of football that they're playing 100%.
Yeah. Let me ask you this question. I feel like I said, we kind of already touched bases. Like, I think the reason why Syria gets so much disrespect is because the style of football isn't very attractive. Obviously, the money is a big issue, and I feel like because put it this way: before last season, a lot of I don't think we've had a Syria team in the final in the Champions League final since Syria have really underperformed Europe. Just forget last season. Just look at before last season. It was so bad. We haven't had a Serie A team in I think the semifinals since Juventus, I think in 16 and 17 season, I think. No, sorry, 17-18 season, I think.
No, Juventus were in the final of the 16-17 season. So
Yeah,
the team after that, the previous team other than AC Milan and Inter Milan last season, the last team to make the semifinals of the Champions League from Italy was Roma in 17-18.
Yeah. And so I just think that for me, it was crazy, and plus we haven't had a Serie A team win their respective European competition since I believe Inter.
Yeah, it was actually Roma in the Conference League. They were the last team from Italy.
Before Roma, it was Inter, I think, right?
Yeah, the famous treble under Jose Mourinho.
So, do you think because Serie A teams have really underperformed a lot in Europe,
Yeah, definitely. There are two main reasons for that. One, teams and managers from Italy they don't have ambition to play in the high level, at the high level and very high phases of the competitions in Europe. So they mostly focus on leagues more. And the other reason, of course, is the money. They don't have it, and of course, the squad depth. They don't have enough squad depth in order to, on a yearly basis, to see a lot more Italian teams compete in the European competitions, which is unfortunately a very, very sad thing these days when it comes to calcio.
Yeah, that is true. I think Serie A definitely, like I said, as you said, they definitely need to start doing better in Europe. And as you said, the depth is very, very largely concerning.
Yeah, and they also, these clubs do not market themselves well. They cannot bring any new owners to the league because they do not know. They didn't go to economics school, so they don't know how to market themselves.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and these owners, let's say Redbird for Milan, they sold Tonali recently. They fired Maldini, who was their main man. They also Zlatan left, but that was expected. But selling Tonali and firing Maldini, that was kind of unexpected action from AC Milan as owners, and firing someone like Maldini will really hurt AC Milan, and especially losing a player like Tonali, who was supposed to be their main captain and stay there for many, many years. But that's unfortunately the way it is. And in Inter as well, they always have to sell their best players every year to make some revenue, which the owners, Suning, the Chinese virus, they use that money on their own needs instead of investing in the club. They don't have enough money for that, and that's why they use the players' money they get to buy expensive luxury, expensive cars, and so on. They do not have enough money, and they have to buy. They have to either sell players to buy them, but most of the time it's to loan players with an obligation to buy them, which is kind of stupid. Constantly doing that is not going to bring any success. Loaning and buying players later on, that's really an embarrassment. In Juventus, for example, they are financially a mess as well, and squad is a mess. But also they're doing criminalistic stuff off the pitch, and as you can see, the recent penalty they received by not banning by being banned in European competitions, which they qualified for the Conference League last season, they were banned from it because of their actions. So very corrupt owners at the top of Serie A, and that also has to do with the Italian government not passing legislative laws in order to. Another big problem in Italy is infrastructure, and they cannot build new stadiums at all. The only two, or technically three, modern stadiums in Italy is the Allianz Stadium where Juventus play it, the Dacia Arena where Udinese play it. You could even count in the Sassuolo Stadium and the Atalanta Stadium. And those four clubs, Juventus, Udinese, Atalanta, and Sassuolo, they're the only clubs in Italy who actually own their stadiums. The rest of the teams, they do not own their stadiums by themselves. The state owns them, not the teams, which is very, very sad. That's another big problem because you see stadiums like the Stadio Giuseppe Meazza or San Siro, but Giuseppe Meazza is their real name. With the stadium, you see the Stadio Olimpico, Stadio Artemio Franchi, where Fiorentina plays at, Renato Dallara, where Bologna plays at. You can see that these stadiums, they're mostly from the Italia 90 FIFA World Cup, from Italy 1990. You also have stadiums that were almost 100 years old, like the Giuseppe Meazza. So that's another big problem as well. In order to attract owners and buyers and to market themselves, well, the Italian teams don't have. And they need to get better stadiums. But in Italy, the government doesn't allow them to do that because they haven't passed legislative laws in order to complete it. So the main problem with this league is the money, and then it's the talent. And another thing that I like to say about this league is that it's become a supermarket for teams from the Premier League and and even Saudi Arabia these days to shop and buy Serie A talent, which is unfortunately a very sad thing. As you can see, many talented players in the league, they get sold after 1 or 2 years, which is quite a sad thing.
Yeah.
Many
if you don't mind,
players
I can name some examples.
Yeah.
Obviously, you got Andre Onana. Then obviously you have Tonali. Then obviously you also have obviously it's not been official yet, but I think it's going to happen soon. Højlund to Manchester United. He'll probably be sold this summer.
Yeah. So. Also, if you go back in history, you can take Inter, for example, selling Roberto Carlos when he played there. You have Hakimi and now Onana. 3 players beloved by Interisti so much, and they only played 1 season for the club because the management under the Moratti days at Inter, now Suning, it has become a very bad thing, and not only for Inter, but all teams in Italy are having to sell their best players in order to make some revenue to compete domestically, and just a bit.
And these players, these players are like their best players. They're not like some squad player, not average player. Like these are their best players, important players,
Yeah, but one thing I will say positively about Serie A is that the league manages to recruit players well, and they know how they want to build their squads, which is something I do appreciate. Unlike the Premier League, which they just throw money and they buy players from anywhere they see. Serie A actually scouts and they look at players all over the world. And for example, Kvicha Kvaratskhelia, he was at the Georgian club. I forgot their name, but he played in Russia and Georgia, and he was scouted by Napoli, and Napoli ended up buying him. And Kim Min-jae as well.
Oh yeah, Kim Min-jae, that's another example.
Now at Bayern Munich, he was signed by Napoli last season by Fenerbahce. So these teams know how to scout players, but the only problem is they cannot keep them longer than 1 or 2 years.
Yeah, Osimhen is probably going to leave. I think Osimhen's going to leave. Osimhen may possibly leave,
Yeah, but it mostly depends on players as well if they want to stay. But even if they want to stay, most Serie A teams have to sell their best players, which is a very sad thing, unfortunately.
Yeah. I want to ask you this question. Do you think the Italy national team in some ways has affected the league?
Absolutely, yes, because the style of football the Azzurri are playing is diabolical. It, of course, Italy won the Euros in 2021, but since then the Italian national team has not been that great. So the
Yeah.
main problem with the national team affecting the league is, of course, the style of football, the behind the scenes thing, as well with the management.
Yeah.
Uh, how players are unhappy in Italy. Eventually, as it seems, as things seem right now, uh, let's say in the next 10, 15 years, if Serie A sells all of their talent that they have, then maybe that's a time when they will finally wake up and realize that they need to do something in order to get back to the very highs which they once had. So, yeah, the Italian national team does play a huge part in terms of how Serie A's image affects the footballing world.
Yeah. All right. Let's round things off here. Do you have hopes for Serie A to do well in the future? Do you think that people will start respecting Serie A more? And you kind of already touched upon this,
Yeah,
with different champions. Because I have seen some teams have been playing good football. Like Napoli this season have taken this, obviously win the Scudetto. I think a lot of neutrals have actually enjoyed watching
yeah,
Napoli this season.
yeah, definitely. You have teams like Sassuolo and Fiorentina who didn't play that well last season, but in seasons before, you could see them playing very nice attacking football,
Yeah,
free
and I
flowing
remember,
football as well.
yeah.
It's just
Sorry to interject there. Atalanta is also another example.
Atalanta, yeah, they've fallen off a bit recently, but during the COVID year and the other COVID year, the two COVID years, that's when Atalanta were at their best. But since then, they've fallen off a bit, but they still are an exciting team to watch. So, yeah, but
Yeah,
as you said, do I have hopes for Serie A? I do. I do have hope that eventually it will overturn the Premier League and other leagues that have more money than Serie A does. I do have hope that in probably the next 10, 15 years it could happen, but it mostly depends on what these corrupted bureaucratic people, the Italian government as well, needs to take part in that. The the teams themselves, the owners, they need to look for different buyers and market themselves better, and that's when Italy can start having more and more respect and more, and of course the stadiums need to be fixed as well. So it needs to improve heavily, which is something Italy has been lacking since the early 2000s. Of course, Inter won the Champions League in 2010, the treble, but even at that time, Serie A was falling off heavily. So the main thing, they need to get new buyers, they need to market themselves more, they need new stadiums, they need to keep their best players, and then eventually they can start competing at the high level once again and get the respect that they used to have. And that's when I believe Serie A will return to the top and overthrow every other league ahead of them. Uh, but as of right now, that will definitely not happen, and it will take a long time for that to happen. It's a question if that will ever happen. So you really do not know. I hope that it returns to the top. That's what I want. But as of right now, definitely not at that level. So we can only hope that it will get better. That's the only thing that we can do. But I still one day believe that Serie A will be the best league in the world again. But in the meantime, it has a lot of work to do to get back there.
yeah. So yeah, thank you for coming on, man. It's been a good pleasure
You're
to
welcome.
discuss Serie A, and hopefully for Serie A's sake it does well. Because like I said, man, I love Serie A. I think it's a very much underappreciated league. I think obviously it was one of the best leagues at a time. I think the 1990s, it was around that time, it was regarded as one of the best
Yeah,
leagues in the world.
90s and early 2000s. That's
Yeah,
when
early 2000s, and
great.
unfortunately, I think the decline, of clubs, and oh yeah, I want to touch upon this. Do you think the Milan fall? Do you think Milan declining as well has kind of made the league not as a lot of people kind of get mad at this league for the Milan. Well, not like let me try to figure out right where to say this. A lot of people are like Milan fans, and because Milan's been super super underwhelming recently, not recently, but they were in a bad era for a long time. Do you think that's why people got disrespected Serie A?
Well, they just view AC Milan because there's 7 Champions Leagues and their titles, but that's why a lot of people watch Serie A, because of AC Milan. That's the club that represents
Yeah,
Italy the best. But you've also got other teams like Juventus, Roma, Lazio, and Inter who have a lot of success as well. But Milan only get that praise more because of their success in Europe. But
yeah,
uh, not only Milan, but clubs like Inter, Roma, Lazio, they went through a banter era as well when Juventus was dominating the league 9 years in a row, winning the Scudetto. So, yeah, it's just been a really bad image from Milan, and not only from them, but from the other teams as well. So, uh, it's been improving recently in terms of title race in Europe. That is very entertaining to watch this currently in Serie A, how teams are fighting for positions in Europe. But in European competitions, they're underwhelming. So, yeah, that's like I said, the main problem for this league is the
fine.
marketing. That's the
Yeah,
main problem. And
yeah,
then
money.
everything else after that.
Yeah, money. All right, so yeah, thank you for coming on, man. Like I said, it was a good pleasure,
You're
and yeah, like
welcome.
I said, guys, subscribe to his channel, BLE Reviews Football.
Yeah.
You'll find him, and obviously follow him on Twitter as well. I'll leave a link in the description below to
Yeah.
follow him respectively. Obviously, like this video if you did enjoy, subscribe if you're new out here. Comment down your thoughts, comment section if you're watching, and like I said, man, thank you for coming on, man. It was a good pleasure,
Yeah.
and let's hope that it does
I'll just say one more thing. Forza Serie A.
for to Syria.
Hopefully the good days will return.
Yeah, I will say this. One last thing before we head off. I do believe, I do agree with you. Serial will get back into. I think people will start respecting it once we have more unique winners, and once these teams perform on a regular basis in Europe. I think
Yeah.
if we can see another Serial club reach the final, maybe and potentially win it this time, then I think people will start respecting it more. You know,
Yeah.
and yeah. So, but like I said though, that's gonna take some time. Like I'm gonna say 5 to 10 years,
Yeah.
minimum. Then
Yeah,
for
about 10, 5, 10, 15 years. So yeah,
yeah, it's not gonna happen anytime soon. Like, let's be real. So
unfortunately.
yeah. So, anyways, I hope you guys did enjoy. Also, to remember to become a member of the channel to get access to members' videos, members' streams. Also, turn on notifications to be notified whenever I go live. And yeah, that's gonna be it pretty much for me today. And yeah, I'll see you guys later, man. Peace out.
Arrivederci.